George P. Ellis. I came to United States April 27, 1910, from Camarion, Corinth, Greece. First I went to Oklahoma, worked in the railroads. I then came to Denver and I worked shining shoes for $12.50 per month, room and board, for about a year. Then I could I could speak a little English. My brother, who came with me, was working at the Griffith Wheel Works in Denver, and I also went there to work. From there, I went to Telluride, Colorado, and I worked in the quartz mines. When the war came on, I enlisted
in the service.
I enlisted.
Spent a week.
Spent a week to Fort Logan. Then I went to Grand Junction.
Oh, gotcha.
Then I got the medical honorable discharge
From the army.
From the army. Then I went to Grand Junction. Thank you. Then I went to Grand Junction, worked on the roundhouse. I worked there until 1920. Then I went to Laramie, Wyoming, and I worked on a roundhouse there, Union Pacific, until 1922. Early Park came with another man to get a job in the coal mines at Monarch Mine. It's non-Lucas, and they worked until the mines for 30. I worked in all the mines for 36 years. That isn't the only mine though. Then I retired in 1958 from Clayton Coal Company, Erie, Colorado. I met my wife, who was working in the Monarch store, September 1923, and started keeping company, and we were married October 12, 1924. Have lived in Louisville ever since. The union changed the working conditions. You asked me why I went to the union. The union changed the working conditions for the better. We got better wages, safety conditions, and the shorter hours. The Northern Coal Company was good company to work for, and had a good union. In 1910, the miners struck for more wages. The union had radical leaders, and the mines were to miners to meet with the company for a meeting about the wages, and the radical leaders fist the hands on the table and told them to count to the operators to the time. So the operators closed the mines. Yeah, fired them all. What's all right is in there. Whoever hears that, they have a lot of fun with me.
That's right.
Dear, oh dear.
So the operators would not meet with the mine union anymore. Strike lasted
like the last 5 years, that time, 1910. 10. No, boy. Then the strike breakers in the put strike breakers in the mine and they build houses and boarding houses. See that communist homes, communist unions.
You feel that it was communist inspired?
Well,
Oh no, we didn't know about communists them days.
isn't that,
They just wanted to break the strikes.
the communists in Russia, they had 1917. That's when they threw out the Tsar. So he wasn't here then, I don't believe. If there
No.
was a way,
Oh, I thought you said that, George. I thought that's what you had written down there.
the strikers,
It was the operators.
the operators done it.
Try to be more careful with your reading, honey.
Well,
Put in and out.
my eyesight is not too good. And build houses and boarding houses in the east side of on 42, Highway 42. By the way, I was the cause of it, putting that when I was a mayor.
I remember that.
Well, let him listen.
Tend to your business, honey.
Yeah.
The union broke.
The union broke Northern Coal Company, so it came to riot. The militia was sent in to calm the trouble down. Then the regular soldiers from Fort Robertson, Nebraska, was sent in there to keep the peace and have from May 1914 to year 1915 before the men went back to work. Then was no union until about 1932. Then conditions came better because the union had pit committees and if the men had grievances, they took it to the committee and they took it to the foreman and at that time settled. And the foreman could not fire the union men without good cause. See, they have that. The times change. Like before, if you do something wrong, out you go. But now they can't. The unions, if it was for the unions, you wouldn't have a job, and your husband.
That's right.
John and Louis. The unions are good. I don't know how long since the Christmas tree began in Louisville, but I feel sure it was the Lions Club who started it with the help of other organizations. No, I did not encounter prejudice. I worked hard, and I was friendly and kind to people, and they treated me the same. I learned to speak English by teaching myself. I did not have a chance to go to school, public, parochial, or private school in this country. And I had 4 years of school in Greece, but only Greek language, because sometimes they teach English in overseas, but I didn't have none. But I accomplished a lot. I served as the Grand Chancellor of Knights of Pythias, served 6 years on the City Council board and 2 years as a mayor of Louisville. What's that?
What years?
What the year? 44. First time it was 1944. 3 terms there, 6 years. 1950, 61, I was a mayor. Yeah, 61. 13 years I was a mayor, 61, 62. Jack was that time, was it?
Yes, that's
Sure,
right.
that's what it was. I preach and practice philanthropy. I always love people. Kiss the women especially. My name is Kissing Cousin.
To the best of my ability.
Philanthropy to the best of my ability. The most tragic accident was the mine explosion in the Monarch Lucas mine, as some called it. They call it Lucas mine. When 4 men lost their lives. One man, Georre, who took care of the mules, was buried so deep in the rubbles they were unable to get him out. So the mine company erected a monument where they thought he was on the hillside south, where the monument mine. I shouldn't have that. And put an iron fence around it so it could be cannot be damaged. The stone. The others killed. It was Tom Stevens, Steve Davis, and Del Sanders. 2 men escaped the black damp, but by climbing up the air shaft ladder. It happened as the night men were coming off shift, and before the day shift went down, there could have been many more lives lost. What else you want to know about me? Shut it off.
No, George, I wanted to ask you something. Getting back to this idea that the company told you that you were to vote Republican. Now, could they tell by the number of votes whether or not the men had done this? Yeah, how would they know that you did what they told you to do?
They wouldn't know.
The communists didn't know how you're going to vote, but they warn you. Says now tomorrow is voting time. You go vote for this man. Now, if they find out you didn't vote, then you had no job.
But they didn't know whether you voted or not.
They didn't know if you vote or not, see.
But you had
But they
better
warn you.
vote.
Yeah, you had to vote for them.
I see.
That's it used to be. That's the truth.
Was Eugene Debs a very popular candidate in this area?
If what?
Eugene Debs.
I don't know.
He was that fellow that played, was run for
No,
socialist.
yes,
Uh-huh.
and he was so
President.
much for the working man. I wondered if he carried any weight
I
here
don't
in
think
this
he
area.
did.
You don't.
He carried much weight, no. They mostly voted Democrat.
I never vote straight ticket. I'm a registered Democrat, but I vote for the man. That's my policy. I vote for the man. A lot of good Republicans and a lot of good
That's right.
Democrats.
You have to figure
See?
the man.
That's what I feel about. I don't care what you do and how you vote, but that's my policy.
I guess that's all.
And
the
when I was a
person
mayor
knows.
and a board member, I tried to do what's right by everybody. And even now, I'm out, but still I do. If it wasn't for me and my wife and nice of people, we wouldn't have no cemetery like it is now.
That's right.
I've been working on it since 1924. That cemetery purchased 1892, and I got the original deed here in my possession.
You do have.
I do have it, yes.
Now, could we make a copy of that, at the Xerox copy, and bring it back,
Of what?
of the deed to
Well-
the cemetery?
You don't
Well-
have the deed to the cemetery, is that it?
Sure I have.
You do have.
Yeah.
I do have. Original deed.
Well, could we make a Xerox of that sometime and get it right back to, or you bring it down and we'll Xerox it?
Take
Yes.
a picture.
Sure.
Well,
Well,
the cemetery was divided in 4 parts. It was the town side and the Knights of Pythias, the Oddfellows, and the Red Men. Well, the Oddfellows disbanded and the KPs bought their ground, see. And when they was going to put that road through, you know, that new road, there was just a lane up there, and they went to the courthouse to find out who owned that, so that it was the Knights of Pythias, see. And they got a deed, they give them a deed for the whole cemetery.
Oh.
Well, just a couple of years ago, they give a deed to the town for that side, the south side of the cemetery, see. So they got the deed. And I went out there with the engineer, and George went out 2 mornings. We went out one morning, it started to rain, so we came in, and I showed him where, I knew where graves were that weren't marked. And then it started raining that first day, so we went the second day. And,
Well, now, have those been identified on something, those unmarked
yes,
graves?
he had a map, and he put
Now, who
No.
is this that
Uh,
you're talking about that has this?
the engineer.
Do you know where we
Dan
can get?
White.
Oh, Dan White.
Uh-huh.
Oh.
We went out with him, and he had a plot, you know, and he marked it down where the graves were. So there was Craigses down there, lived next to my folks, and they lost 4 children in 2 weeks with black diphtheria.
Oh.
And then Mr. Craigs, he committed suicide.
Oh, look, Carolyn.
See this part of
That's
it.
just the Knights of Pythias.
This is Knights of Pythias, and not Policy. This is Redmond, and the city's over here. And I know who's buried here and where, and in here, but no, I don't know nothing about there,
This
nothing
is
about
the Red Men down here, see?
May we copy this also, George?
Well, already got it down there.
Oh, they.
I'll let Dan have that.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Yes. This, now does Dan have a copy of this deed?
Who?
Dan White? Would he have a copy of that?
Dan White don't have a copy of this, does he? This
Yeah,
is the
no.
original deed.
No.
He
Yes,
has
they have. They have.
Copy of this original deed?
Yes, they have, because you can get them in Boulder on extract title.
I thought he just got for the town ground, you give the
They
deed.
got all of them, all 3 of them. And then Don and I went down and asked him. It was Don Smith, you know. And then Haim and Ham and then Don says, we're going to get it from over there. And so we went over there. I got it them home too. It's a prosthetic copy. This is the original cemetery. Now you look at it from the east side. You turn that off?
Go on.
And they have
Well,
no
let's
deed.
start first.
They got to have a deed. See, this is I got this made down for a while.
Oh.
You people made this because you were on out.
Yes.
See?
Yes.
And it says, I know it's on.
Yeah.
It says Louisville Fraternal Cemetery. See? And we give a deed and description, the lot, the blood, and everything. You take them to the courthouse and have them recorded. And it's yours. But the Redmond give a receipt. Now Joe Coet, he used to work for Henning. Well, his father and mother buried in the town part. He says, George says, I like to have 2 graves there. I says, well, my father got a deed. I says, well, George, I says, I never see, and I like to see one, what it look like. So he went to his father's belongings, and he found a receipt, burial receipt, pay so much for a burial receipt. No descriptions. I said, well, that isn't valid. And so I made it for him, and the city mayor and the Margie signed it, and he got a deed for it. The rest of them don't have.
I think we have a cemetery they can well be proud of.
And it was 2
This-
nights of it, there's me and Laura and Uncle Harry and Jenny Todd and well, let people know.
He's like a broken record.
Let people know.
Janie Todd and said to me, let's go to the Lions Club and see if they will get some trees or something to plant along the north side of the cemetery to cover that mine. So I couldn't see that mine. That mine was there then. And I got sick and I couldn't go, so she went herself. Well, the Lions Club didn't want to do anything about it. So we took it upon ourselves, and we went to the town board. Bill Jenkins was the mayor, and we asked him if the town would give us some money to plant the trees. So they went, they give $25, and some of the men went to Fort Collins and bought the trees. And I and Janie went around town and collected from people that had $1, from the people that had someone buried there, and we bought hoses and we watered the trees. The water was already there. It was there in about 1908, I think. My Uncle Harry McNally was on the board, or mayor, and they put the water out there.
1909.
1909. And so George got some of the Legionnaires and some men, and they went out there and they planted those trees. And we went out and watered them. In the first spring, they wouldn't turn the water on, and Otto Schreider had a tank like they used to have for the thrash machines, and they got water from the creek and watered those trees so that they wouldn't die. And I've gone out there a lot of times, and my Uncle Harry or my dad or Sam Smith went with me, and we watered those trees, get them going, and they all came, but just a few of them. But I think in the first place they was planted too close, but they were small trees and they put them in. Yeah. And then George got the Legionnaires and some other fellas, and they hauled those rocks from El Dorado Springs, and they made that shelter house. And he done a lot of work out there.
I got the rails from the roof from Centennial Mine, Fred Nesbitt, and I got the rails, John Seidel, you know, the Washington Mine. He built the kettle guard. You're in the front gate, you know, you got a kettle guard. I've been working all the time, woman, I'm still working.
He sure has. And we went out there and raked grass. I've seen that cemetery when you couldn't see the tombstones for sweet clover and sunflowers. And when they had the WPA on, why they sent men out there and cut the weeds. But we watered the trees, and then we went around, collected again $1 from the people, and we hired a man, Mike Hardknuckle, and he worked out there, and he watered the trees, and he cut the weeds. And then we worked from there, and my dad passed away, and we took the sod out of our grass, out of our ground, and put sod on our lot, and that was the first grass that was out there. Well, then Amanda Smith, her husband had died, so she gave George money to seed her lot.
By seed only.
And
I
then
got a 5 cents there.
From that on, people would give him seed, you know, and he'd plant it, and then it just started to spread until it was all over the cemetery. And finally, George went to the town board and asked them they'd cut it. They appropriated so much money for the cemetery, but one year it was just about $300 or $400.
$250 first time. Then I went back second year, and after I left, I asked somebody, Roy Orton or somebody, how they come out. So they say, he says, who age thinks he is? Me, see. But they appropriated that. The second year they appropriated $500, and the third year I went before them again. They appropriated $1,200. So then after that they cut it down to $900 until 2-3 years ago. They got a good budget now, and it looks so nice.
And then George went to the town board, and he asked the town to take the cemetery over. See, and so they did, and now they've got it so it's perpetual care on this deed that they give them for that part where they
give them their own ground back.
Clause
You know.
in there too that they'll take care of the whole cemetery, perpetual care.
After what fellas gave us that quick claim deed, they didn't have no business to do it, you know, legally, because your house, you own it. I can't buy it unless I have a cause. See, to get a deed from the courthouse. But anyhow, we don't claim the town part, but anyhow we give them back, and the provisions on perpetual care. And Redmond have the ground to hold it. But I got things home.
It's been beautiful this summer. taken care of. They keep it watered all the time. You know, they water there at nights, I think. In the evening we go out, and they've got the sprayers on watering.
Only thing they don't do, you know, the men, you know, they water the urns, but they won't do it. Laura and I go out there, and you'd be surprised. Everybody's all we can.
Yes, several.
I got first time to get 5 cents for my work. 5 cents for my work. Not a penny.
We've been kind of neglectful. Last week we went to convention, Pythian Sisters and Knights of Pythias in Denver. And then George did go out. What night did you go out and water?
I
We
go
haven't been
once,
out for
twice
2
a
or
week.
3 nights.
I hope it's not better words than
It was better in the west than in the east. Well, I couldn't answer that because I don't know what the conditions was in the east. But I do know the northern fields was better than the south. They lived in the company houses down there around the mines. They had to trade at the company stores, and they never drew any money. They'd go and buy scrip, get scrip, you know, and time payday come around, why they'd already spent it. And they had to trade there, and everything was high, and they had to just never seen no money, you know.
Well,
'Cause
in your opinion, the unions definitely were an asset when they came in.
definitely.
should
Last
say,
week,
I
you
should
see,
say.
you're at in the camera. You're at in the camera with the Reichfeller, and they have a memorial down to Ledlow. John D. Reichfeller, his grandpa, great-grandpa, he was the big chief in the coal mines here.
Down
And
in the
you got to do
Colorado
what you
fields,
say or else.
southern
You go
fields.
down there and brought the thugs, you know, and killed down many Greeks over there and the foreigners because
Children and
they
all.
got to work, you know.
They made
you
them
can't
move
speak
out of the
English.
company houses, and they lived in tents, and they set fire to them tents, and they just burned those people to death. They got a big monument down at Ludlow erected.
every
in
year.
Mayfield.
So, well, what's his name? I was going to say a minute ago. Governor
Hammonds.
Emmons. You know, the strike, he brought in the militia and shoot down our miners here, right in Louisville.
Well, they didn't kill any of our miners, honey. but
Why?
They were
Because
shooting.
companies had the money.
They had a machine gun up on a tower up there on Hecla Heights and Hecla Hill, and when we'd come uptown to the show, why they turned that searchlight on us, and they'd follow us clear down till we go in our back gate. We lived south of town, and I was working for Mrs. Huber in the house. I was doing housework. I quit school to go and work because the strike was on, and that was in 1914. And I called her up that morning, and I said, Mrs. Huber, my mother don't want me to come to lodge because the men was up there in a deep ditch, and they was shooting at the Hecla, and they was shooting out. And I said, my mother doesn't want me to come because there's a trouble over to Hecla Heights, and I said, she doesn't know what might happen. And I said, she don't want me to come. Oh, you come to work, you're safe as a bug in a rug, she said. So I told Mother, she said, all the trees in the buildings, they couldn't possibly hit us here. So I went, and I had to wash that day, so I washed, and about noon her mother came in. She lived south of Lafayette, and she came in and she picked up Mrs. Huber and the 2 children and took them out to her farm. And when she told me, she says, now you wash up the dishes and don't bother about scrubbing. You can do that when I get ready to come back. And when I was going down, down there, some people lived, Riddlers at the end of Main Street. Of course, that south addition wasn't on there then. The mine was there, the Acme mine. And we used to turn there, Gridler's Corner. And that's across from where, Margaret, what's her name, Charlotte Cologne's daughter, across the street from there. Well, it's down a block below where the Blue Parrot is. And I met my aunt coming, Aunt Smith's mother, and she said, my goodness, Laura, why haven't you come home? Well, I said, why? And she said, your mother called at 10 o'clock. She said, for you to come home. She was so nervous and worried about you. I said, well, Mrs. Huber never told me. But I said, her mother came in and took her and the children to the farm. And so Mother was sure mad about that. She said, if anything had happened to you up there, she said, boy, she said, I'd sure told Mrs. Huber. And I said, well, thank God didn't hurt me. And so then she stayed over there about a week. Well, like I say, the militia came in. And the men, they'd gone to Denver to get a load of ammunition, and they was up there on that hill, Murphy's Hill, and they was coming down. That's the town hall.
Do you have a date on that?
I think this was taken about 1902.
Oh, okay.
My mother had addressed it to send to my uncle.
If you're gonna write that out, I will.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
So they started the machine. Don't you think, Laura ought to give her name and?
Okay, do you wanna do
and
that?
so we can
No,
know
you
which
have to
case
talk
this is.
louder, because I don't hear too good. I lost
Okay.
hearing in my left ear.
Laura, why don't you start by giving us your name and
Well-
your maiden name? Let's start out that way.
Well, this is, have you got that thing?
Mm-hmm.
Laura Bell Smith Ellis, born in Louisville, January 24th, 1895. My mother's stepfather came to Louisville from Newton, Iowa. He got a job at the Welch's mine east of Louisville. Later, he sent for Grandma and the family. They arrived here in March 1879. My mother was 5 years old, but was 6 in June of the same year. My grandmother was very dissatisfied when she got here and vowed she was going back to Iowa. But she stayed on here and passed away December 1912. My father's folks, and he came from England. Dad was 5 years old when they came to this country. They first lived in Streator, Illinois. Then Granddad was a brickmaker by trade. Then my grandparents, Edward Smith, came to City, Nebraska and took up a homestead, but they were unable to hold on to it. The family was large, so Granddad gave up the homestead and the family came to Marshall, Colorado. My grandmother, Ann Smith, passed away in 1879. Granddad, with his oldest son, worked in the coal mine, and later on they moved to Louisville. My granddad helped make the bricks in the old Red Men's Hall that stood where the Catholic Sisters' home is now. They burnt the bricks in a large hole just north of the swimming pool. My father met my mother here, and they were married on October the 24th, 1891. I and my brother were born to this union. My brother was born on December the 14th, 1892. I have lived in Louisville all my life. My brother passed away August the 13th, 1973. My father was an engineer in the mines, Acme, Rex Number 1, Centennial, and the industrial mine in Superior. Dad and mother both passed away in 1940. Most all the houses in Louisville, oh, you asked about the stucco.
Yeah.
Most all the houses in Louisville were made of wood. When stucco came out, many people stuccoed over the wooden homes as a improvement and the look of their homes. And I think few brick homes were built due to the taking the coal out of the mines. The ground sometimes sank when the mines caved in. All records were destroyed. Now you ought to ask me these questions
Okay,
about the church.
what year was the Methodist church built?
All records were destroyed after the Hennings came to town. They took over. They changed the name of the Methodist church to Community Church, thinking people who came to town of other denominations would come to the community church. But first John J. Carlton came with his family from England. He started the first church in his home. As the attendance grew, they went into other folks' homes to hold their meetings. Then, when the attendance got too large, they met in the schoolhouse. Then they worked and built the Methodist church. Mr. Carlton was the first minister for the church. He worked in the mines during the day, and church, he'd preach on Sunday. But he died before the church was completely finished. The church was built in about 1884. Let's see, church was all finished. But his family, Mr. and Mrs. John Burkett, Mrs. Nicholas Thomas, Grace Graham, it's his mother, Mr. and Mrs. John Hutchison, Mrs. Andrew Clarkson were great workers in the church. They helped to raise the money to build a church. About 1909, the church was changed. The room on the north was built the choir loft. On the south of, let's see, I hate to ball that up.
You won't.
The room on the north was, on the south I should have had. The little room on the north was built, and the choir loft was built on the south side, and the doors were changed where they now are. Later on, a dining room and kitchen were added. I would not know what year that was added, but it was after I and George was married. I don't know how long it has been since it was changed back to the Methodist Church, but I know the minister and the district superintendent were the ones who changed it back to the Methodist Church.
Laura, may I interrupt just a minute and ask you a question? You said that when the Hennings took over, in what manner did they take over?
Well, she was secretary. She took over as the secretary, and Henning attended part-time when he could, but they just seemed to take over and just run the church.
And about what year would you say this was? Can you remember?
Well, they
anything?
came here in
21, 22, late 21, 22.
21.
Same year I come.
But before that, it was the Methodist Church.
Yes.
And then for a while it was community. Oh.
It was built for the
Yes,
the Methodist
okay.
Church. On that card, see, it tells you here.
Yes, yes. I wondered.
He is the originator of this fall festival.
Yes.
Yes, I
The
know.
And
lady-
that's why I become secretary. They take all the money, their name.
I see.
The Ladies' Aid, yeah,
Mhm.
they,
So-
but we don't want to record that.
But actually, then the Hennings played a large part
Yes,
in
they
starting.
did. They did. Mrs. Henning and Mrs. Jake Williams, Mrs. Janie Williams. Janie was the president, and she was the secretary of the Ladies' Aid, and they're the ones that started this fall festival. And then
Okay,
they gave
fine.
it up, and the Legionnaires took over.
Okay, fine, thanks.
The first fall festival it was where Thomas Store is now. Years ago. Hackaday used to own that place. Not Hackaday, yeah. They had a filling station there.
Yes.
Remember?
Then you asked about if I knew anything about the Ku Klux Klan. Yes, the KKK I put were active in 1923 and 1924. The church used to be held on Sunday evenings too. I was not there, but one Sunday evening the Ku Klux came into the church in robes and hoods and laid some money on the altar. They were peaceful, and it did not last very long. It was organized around here, but it didn't last very long.
Were there ever any sort of destructive things done?
No,
Nothing.
they burned crosses, but they never did any harm. It was
Can you
just
remember any of the lawns where the crosses were burned?
Let's see.
One who was down there, Rome Perella's filling station there.
Rome Perella's filling station, there was a
Uh-huh.
cross burned.
And
Brought one close.
there were several
Did-
that were burned.
Uh,
They didn't do anything. It was just burned, but there was no riots or anything. It
And the
was
reasoning
all-
behind the burning, do you remember that? Did they give any indication as to why these particular places were chosen?
No, not that I know of.
Well, you would be young. Not really, though, were you?
No,
There's a 48 years ago, they tried to stop me from
Yeah,
that.
I was 29 when I and George was married, and it was, he was married in 24, so they were active in 23, 24.
And they tried to stop you from marrying
Yeah,
Laura?
it's Hodgson,
Yes.
you know,
Dan Hodgson.
Dan Hodgson.
I
Why?
was working in the Monarch store because he said George was Catholic.
Got
He
with
come
it.
in the store, and
a quarter
I used
board.
to make the sausage and hamburger, and I was behind the counter trimming the meat, getting ready for it. And he came in and he said, Laura, he said, you better stop going with George Ellis. And I says, well, why? And he says, he's a Catholic. I said, no, he isn't. I says, he's an Orthodox. I says, his church is Orthodox church. And I said, anyhow, Dan, I said, that's what our country was founded on. I says, religious freedom. And I said, I'm not going to stop going with George. I said, no matter what the consequences is.
Well, then actually their target was mainly Catholics.
Well, I think it was people that opposed the Catholics, you know. I don't know why, but he thought that George was a Catholic, and he told me not to stop going with him.
But the Ku Klux Klan, actually, their targets were Catholics.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
Okay,
There
thanks.
wouldn't have been any blacks.
No.
Okay.
Now then you asked me if we had a wedding picture. We have, there it is.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yes, we
Yes, when I
have.
was young and good-looking guy. She fell for me.
Yes, I kidnapped. He didn't fall for me.
And I swallowed the bait, the hook and all, the sinker.
It says, yes, we have our wedding picture, but I don't have my dress. It was a quiet affair. We went to Denver, and a friend of George's who went to school with him in Greece, and his wife, a little English girl, stood up for us. We were married by Reverend Jacob R. Rader, a Methodist minister who was a minister in Erie, Colorado church when he was a young man. Now, I didn't notice you had on the back about the schools. So.
Yeah. Yes. Do you know when anything about the company houses? Did you write?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm. Let's see. Is that a going?
Yes.
I recall the Northern Coal Company built 4 homes in Louisville before the 1910 strike. They are on Lincoln Avenue. Milton Hobbs lives in one. Henry McHugh's home's the other. Walt Leggett's and the Cornelius home, where the homes built then. Then when the 1910 strike came on, many homes were built on Heckler Hill, as we called it. After the strike, the homes were sold and moved away. Just the casino, that's that big white one down there, is left on the left side of the road going to Lafayette. I don't know how long it has been since the little brick school was built, but as long as I can remember, it was there. The first school in Louisville was a small wooden one that stood on Main Street. As the town grew, it was bought and moved by Mrs. Emma Harris to her property on the corner of Lincoln and Walnut Street. You lived there.
Yes, we used to live there.
Later, Mrs. Harris sold her property to L.W. Melliker, who sold the old schoolhouse to someone, and they moved it to Erie, where they built onto it. That was the school my mother and Uncle Harry McAnally attended.
Laura, may I ask you a question? You called the large place left at the Hecla Heights the casino. Casino? What did they do specifically there?
Well, it was just like a pool hall.
Oh.
You know, it was a place for the men to go. I suppose they had pool table and played cards and, you know.
But they didn't sell groceries or
Oh,
anything
no.
like that.
No.
It was strictly a recreational place.
I don't know if they had a store over there or not, but that hill was covered, and they had a large
There was a
boarding
hotel.
house there.
Yeah, there was a boarding house which burned down
Yeah.
at some point.
And there was a big tower there, you know, where they had
Yeah.
the machine gun.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
I got that in with George. The grade school that was torn down was first a 4-room. Look at that picture. 2 here and 2 on the other side, and 2 above, and the belfry was here. Well, then in 1922 they built on these 4 rooms. There are 2 at the top, 2 at the bottom, and then straight from this hall was an office building, and up here was an office where they used to go in and recite. Then I got that. So I put that in there. That's already recorded, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
West side was built 2 offices. I was in the 2nd grade, and we were the first class to occupy the southwest room downstairs in the new park. I went half of the year into to the Little Red Schoolhouse, and then I finished up in Bessie Brown was my teacher. 2nd grade. Mrs. Hamilton taught me in the 1st grade, I and my brother, and she also taught my mother and Uncle Harry. So she taught here, I think, 32 years. Now I think that's all you asked me now.
Okay. Laura, you
Yes, Laura, do you remember when sidewalks were first put in Louisville? Was this a large drive as the
Well,
curbs and gutters were, or did it just come a little at a time?
No, the sidewalks was built. We hadn't been married very long.
You got the checkbook there, write a check, we pay for cash.
But
Of
this
course, I
was
know where the
something.
checkbook is.
But this was something that the town then did as a whole.
Yes,
Well,
yes,
the
you was
town-
compelled to put them in.
You
If you
were.
didn't have the money, why you borrowed the money from the bank and
I
paid
was
the bank.
board member when they proposed for curbs and gutters.
Yes, I
And
remember.
we borrowed $2,000 from the government and didn't put them in right away,
Right.
but 2 years later started to put them in.
Right, I remember that. I think we have that in the paper too, don't we, Carolyn? Another thing I was wondering about was your police and fire protection at that time.
We had insurance all the time.
Did you always have a volunteer fire department?
Yes,
You did
first they
have.
had just the cart and hose. Don't you remember when they used to have those hose cart races?
Yes, but at that time I had the truck, you know, and
Oh,
that
they
was
had the
just-
truck already.
Right, that was something that they just
Yeah, they just had a cart, and the men would get out and run to the fire and pull that cart, and it had the hose, and they'd pull the hose off and attach it to the hydrant, and then spray the fire.
1, 2, 3 places. One over here, 2 blocks up, where Upson's it was, station for the cart. One down to Italy, one in town. And run for get him out, you know, run with the band. Because it's fire.
Sure, it was hard work, and then I don't know what year they got that fire truck.
I think when I was 1926, I joined the fire department, and I was captain on the hook and ladder team. But they had the truck.
Harry Jenkins was the fire chief when they bought that truck. First
Oh.
little truck.
You said there were fire hydrants though back at that time, so then
yeah.
water and so forth had been brought into
Oh,
Louisville at a
yes.
rather early date.
Yes, the fire was in, or ever since I can remember, they had the fire
Hydrant.
hydrants.
The Louisville Cemetery put in 1909.
Oh, for you.
And Harry McNally, you know, Catherine's father was a mayor.
Well, then you had water
So
at a
yes.
very early date in your
yeah.
homes.
Oh, yes.
I see.
Well, at first when my grandmother came, the Front Street was the main street. And I've heard my mother talk about Bob Locke's store. So that was the store down there. And then the next street, and then it come. I can remember when this house over here, some people lived there by Fidels, named the Fidels, and I lived I was in the first grade of school. And one of those Fidel boys was in my grade, and his father was killed in the mine. That was the last house up here. And over there where Vons lived, that house was there. And then there was houses south of there. But that was the end of the town there. And up on the hill here was Harper's farm. Up there on the hill.
I remember that. Laura, you didn't mention Prohibition. How did this affect you in any way, or the town in any way?
Well, of course, it got Prohibition, and I think we had about 13 or 14 saloons here at that time. And
bootlegging was a big business then.
No, that was selling over the bar. You know, it was legal.
But during Prohibition, it wasn't legal.
Oh no.
So
well,
what,
they had some here that was, bootlegged. But Boulder was the best customers. They used to come with their suitcases and take it. There was no saloons over there, and they'd come even when the saloons was open. The interurbans used to run.
Did Prohibition cause any
Yeah, there
problem?
was some arrested with caught bootlegging, And they'd come see the interurbans used to meet here. One would go to Boulder, and the other would come from Boulder, and they used to pass there. Well, there was a switch there, and they'd get off the Boulder car and turn the switch for the car to go down on the second track. They had 3 tracks there, and they'd get out with their suitcase, and they'd fill their suitcase, get the suitcase filled. Time they get down to the depot in time to catch the Denver car up to Boulder.
Old Jerry Sandy, he died not too long ago.
Yeah.
He was
And
arrested so many times, and one time, the last time I arrested him, Sheriff Blom, and the district attorney come in and said, Jerry, why don't you quit selling that stuff? I use a little profanity now. I say what he said. If it weren't for his sons of bitches in Boulder to buy it, I won't sell it. I won't make it. Yeah. So they let him go.
And Boulder always kind of turned their nose up at the miners. They thought they was low down because they worked underground. And you go over there and you'd say you was from Louisville, but they just kind of treat you cool. So my mother was in White and Davis store. That's where Brooks Faber is now. And I went down. They had a nice art department.
All that was in there? Oh, for Christ's sake. I was swearing.
They had a nice art department down there. And I told Mother, she was up by the dry goods, and I said, I'm going down to the art department and find something to embroidery. So I went down, and when I came back, when I was down to the art department, that girl was sweet enough to eat me up. She wanted to know if I lived in Boulder. I told her no. She said, are you a tourist? And I said, no, I live in Louisville. She shut up like a clam. So I went on up to the...
What year was that? Do you remember?
That was after Aunt George was married.
Oh.
Then in the late 20s.
Oh.
If you were married in 24, then this would have been about in the late 20s.
Yes. And she said, and so the lady up in the other dry goods department, she said, do you live in Boulder? I said, no, we live in Louisville, and we're neither a wop nor a bootlegger.
Oh.
She said, well, I don't feel that way about the Louisville people. Well, I said, you're 1 in 100. I said, if you come over here and you say you're from Louisville, I said, they drop you like a hot potato. So I told her what happened in the art department. So I told her, I said, Boulder's the best customers.
She's pretty good right now. You want to talk to her now?
Good. Hold it, Laura. Let's backtrack. Will you repeat what you just said?
That's okay. You should call later.
Okay, what about?
Where you said that you were working at this time.
Oh, On armistice.
Yeah. And Miriam was, Esther was expecting
Yes.
Miriam?
And she had lost 2 boys because she was not able to carry them. And so I went to work. Of course, there was a lot of excitement because Mrs. Phillips called my mother and asked her if she knew that the armistice was signed. And so I went to work at 7 o'clock.
And you were working from Owen Thoroughway?
Owen Thoroughway in the Bungalow Drugstore. And so I'd clean up the store, and then I'd go over and do up Esther's work, because she stayed off of her feet a good part of the time. So, and of course he was all excited, and so I went over in the store after I got through at Esther's, and they lived next door. There was a 2-story house next door to the bungalow. And he got in with this bunch, and he went to Denver with them. They drove that truck into Denver, like it was. See, they got the casket here, and they had on their Kaiser Bill, Gone to Hell. And they see these knockers. They had them. That was his flowers.
Yes.
And that was taken up there where Rome Perella's garage is. That's where the first undertaker got retired.
I'd like to ask you something else too. Do you remember if the town had any celebrations as a whole, like Labor Day, on 4th of July, or on any other occasions? Was it a community type thing?
Well, yes, they used to have nearly every 4th of July they'd celebrate. They had a big ballpark down there, and they had stands in there, and they had a little place where the band used to play. We used to have a good band here. And
Jack, I told him to go later.
oh yeah, and they'd have picnics down there on 4th of July, and they'd have a ball game after, And one 4th of July they had a 3-day celebration here, and they played the hose carts ran, and Louisville won the hose cart race in the morning. Well, in the afternoon they was playing ball, and the men, they was overjoyed because they'd won the cart race, the hose cart race, and they had too much to drink, so they couldn't play ball at all. And Lafayette won, and my mother she loved ball games, and her and Dad Thurloway, that was Tom Thurloway's wife. She was sitting in the grandstand beside my mother, and